Southern England, June 1940. The hum of the Luftwaffe engines echoed through the morning fog as the skies above southern England churned with the sound of approaching death. Below, the ground trembled under the weight of thousands of Luftwaffe bombers, accompanied by their fighter escorts. The German Luftwaffe, the pride of Nazi Germany, was tasked with completing what many thought was the final step in the Battle of Britain, shattering the Royal Air Force. But, as Luftwaffe Chief of Staff, General Hans Jeschenek, sat behind his desk at the German High Command in Berlin, he was confident. His mind was consumed with thoughts of victory, not of any potential setbacks. He had no reason to believe the British could stand a chance against the relentless wave of bombers. To the Luftwaffe. The Royal Air Force, RAF, was a collection of brave but ultimately outdated squadrons, their planes ancient relics compared to the sleek, lethal Luftwaffe fighters. On this fateful morning, June 17, 1940, a report came across the desk of Jeschenek that would prove pivotal in the months to come. The British had something new, a new weapon they had been developing in secret. The Germans dismissed it immediately: radar. To the Luftwaffe, the idea of detecting aircraft by bouncing radio waves off them seemed ludicrous. The very idea seemed too primitive, a fantasy. How could such an untested technology compete with the well-oiled, precise machine of the Luftwaffe? Radar, they sneered. A mere novelty, not worth concern. And so, with full confidence, the Luftwaffe launched its assault, prepared to overwhelm the RAF, confident that the skies were theirs for the taking. They would soon learn that they were gravely mistaken. Southern England, July 10, 1940. The German bombers took to the sky with their fighter escorts, roaring over the English Channel toward their first targets, airfields along the southern coast of England. These early days of the Battle of Britain were marked by frantic chaos, as the British scrambled to defend against the seemingly unstoppable force from the skies. But unknown to the Germans, hidden in plain sight, a network of radar stations had already been put into place along the coast. The radar stations, part of what the British had dubbed Chain Home, were carefully dispersed at strategic points. Their purpose was simple but ingenious: to detect incoming aircraft at long range and provide the RAF with the precious seconds they needed to scramble their fighter aircraft in time. At the RAF's Fighter Command headquarters in Bentley Priory, Group Captain Sir Hugh Dowding stood at his command desk, watching a screen filled with blips and pings. His mind raced as he plotted the locations of incoming German aircraft, sending instructions to the fighter squadrons to intercept. The radar network had already proven invaluable. But it was still early in the battle, and the Germans remained unaware of the threat. Meanwhile, on the other side of the Channel, Luftwaffe pilots were setting out for what they expected would be another straightforward mission. They had no idea they were being tracked, no idea that their every move was being mapped out by the British radar system. As they flew into the heart of England, they were unaware that their targets were already prepared, waiting in the wings. Fighter pilots like Squadron Leader John "Johnny" Baldwin of 11 Group's No. 66 Squadron gripped their controls, scanning the skies, unaware that the British radar network had already given their commanders precise information about the incoming Luftwaffe attack. Baldwin's Spitfire roared into the sky, along with his fellow pilots, racing against time as they climbed to meet the German bombers head-on. Battle of Britain's Skies, July 11, 1940. The British fighters tore through the clouds, diving down toward the German bombers. From the cockpit of his Messerschmitt Bf 109, Oberleutnant Wilhelm Meyer could see the approaching British aircraft. At first, he was pleased. He and his comrades had not been expecting such a response. These British pilots had been known for their bravado, but their planes were antiquated, outclassed by the sleek German designs. Meyer felt confident. However, as the two forces collided in the heavens, Meyer's confidence began to falter. The British pilots were relentless. Their attacks were precise, focused. The RAF's fighters, the Spitfires and Hurricanes, engaged the bombers with deadly force. The Luftwaffe bombers faltered under the sustained assault, losing formation and dropping their payloads with less accuracy than intended. But what struck Meyer was the coordination of the attack. The British seemed to be everywhere, always one step ahead. It was as if they knew exactly where to strike, when to appear, and where the Germans were vulnerable. At first, he attributed it to luck, but as the battle wore on, the truth began to dawn on him. What the Luftwaffe didn't know was that the radar stations were feeding real-time data to Fighter Command, allowing them to guide their planes to the exact location of the Luftwaffe's bombers and intercept them before they could even reach their targets. Every movement the Germans made was being tracked, and every move they made was being countered by the British pilots who had the advantage of radar intelligence. Berlin, August 1940. The failure to break the RAF's defense at the Battle of Britain was a shock to German high command. At first, they blamed poor tactics, weather, and the British ability to improvise. But as the battle dragged on, cracks began to show in the Luftwaffe's once impenetrable confidence. General Jeschonnek convened a meeting with Luftwaffe leaders. "The British cannot possibly continue to fight with such stubborn resistance," he argued. "It must be the result of some unforeseen factor. Our bombers are being intercepted with remarkable accuracy." As the officers around him pondered, a young Luftwaffe intelligence officer, who had recently returned from a reconnaissance mission in Britain, spoke up. "It's their radar, sir," he said quietly. "We dismissed it early on as a curiosity, but it's real. The British can see us before we see them. Every time we approach their airfields, their fighters are already in the sky waiting for us." The room fell silent. The magnitude of the revelation sank in. The Luftwaffe had underestimated the power of the radar network. It had been an essential tool that allowed the RAF to punch far above its weight. But by the time the Luftwaffe fully understood the importance of Britain's radar system, it was too late. The Battle of Britain had already turned against them. The cost of underestimating the radar and the RAF's ability to use it to their advantage had proven too high. London, September 1940. September 1940. The skies above Britain were filled with the smoke and debris of battle. The Luftwaffe's relentless bombing campaigns had continued throughout the summer, but with each passing day, the cost to Germany became clearer. The RAF, despite being outnumbered and facing incredible odds, held firm. The iconic Spitfires and Hurricanes tore through the skies, but it wasn't just their agility or courage that had allowed them to stand their ground. It was their radar intelligence network that had given them the edge. As the Luftwaffe's bombers and fighters turned back toward their bases, their formations in disarray, their commanders were left with grim faces. The high command in Berlin was forced to reconsider its earlier dismissals of Britain's radar technology. It had become clear. Britain's radar system had not only provided crucial early warnings, but had also allowed RAF fighters to intercept German bombers with an unprecedented level of coordination. Oberleutnant Wilhelm Meyer, who had fought in the skies over Britain, returned to his base in France, exhausted and bewildered. He could still hear the sounds of the British engines, always just behind him. They seemed to know exactly where to strike. The radar networks had given the British the ability to react with precision, often before he and his comrades even knew they were being hunted. "How were they always there?" Meyer muttered to himself. "Every time we went in, they were waiting. It was like they knew our every move." But it was no longer a matter of tactics. The battle had evolved into a fight of endurance. The Luftwaffe, despite its early victories, was losing the war in the skies. As the days passed, the realization set in. The radar networks had turned the tide. The RAF had successfully defended its skies, and the Luftwaffe's invasion plans for Britain began to falter. General Jeschonnek, sitting at his desk in Berlin, grimly looked over the casualty reports. The Luftwaffe had lost over 1,700 aircraft, and hundreds of experienced pilots had been taken from the war. The planned Operation Sea Lion, the German invasion of Britain, was now on hold indefinitely. "We underestimated them," Jeshonek admitted in a meeting with his officers. Their radar network was the key. We didn't see it coming. In the months that followed, the Luftwaffe was forced to regroup. The once great confidence in their superiority in the skies was shattered. The British had fought back with an ingenuity that had caught the Germans completely off guard. Radar, a technology once dismissed as irrelevant, had proven to be the unsung hero of the Battle of Britain. London, October 1940. In the aftermath of the Battle of Britain, life for the RAF pilots who had survived the battle was a strange mixture of relief and exhaustion. They had won, but the cost had been immense. Many pilots had been lost, and the pressure had been unbearable. Still, it was undeniable. The RAF had achieved the impossible. They had repelled the Luftwaffe's invasion, a victory that would be remembered as one of the defining moments of World War II. But for those who had known the truth of the victory, it was clear that the real hero of the Battle of Britain had not worn a uniform. It had been the radar system, the invisible hand that had guided the RAF to victory. The radar stations, scattered along the coastline, remained active as the war pressed on. Their presence became an integral part of Britain's defense strategy. While the Luftwaffe regrouped and launched new attacks, the radar network remained vigilant, constantly scanning the skies for incoming threats. And the Germans, having learned the hard way, began to adapt their tactics, but the advantage remained with the British. In the years that followed, as the war raged on, the importance of radar continued to grow. It became a tool that allowed the Allies to plan and execute operations with precision, from the air to the sea. But in the aftermath of the Battle of Britain, its legacy was cemented as a symbol of British resilience and ingenuity. As the Luftwaffe regrouped and refocused their efforts elsewhere, the full impact of the radar network would be felt far beyond the skies of Britain. It had changed the course of the war, but it had also demonstrated the power of technology and innovation in warfare. For those who had fought in the skies over Britain, the memory of that summer would remain etched in their minds forever. They had seen the enemy at their strongest, and they had seen them falter. They had learned that the most dangerous weapon was not always the one you could see, but the one you couldn't. The radar that had allowed them to fight back against the might of the Luftwaffe. And so, as the RAF continued its relentless defense of Britain, and as the war raged on, the Germans were left to ponder the lesson they had learned: never underestimate what lies unseen.